Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at cesj.org. Hello, thanks for joining us again. This is Dave Hamill, and for this episode and the next one, I'm actually bringing you audio from another podcast or internet radio show, because the subject matter is very positive and we want to spread this information as much as possible. The show is called The Focus Show, which stands for Follow One Course Until Successful, and the host is MeShorn Daniels. MeShorn is part of our CESJ group in the Louisville, Kentucky area. He and Martin Smith and Peter Hayes and some others have been doing a great job growing the movement there for years. But today's content is primarily about another group MeShorn is part of called Descendants of American Slaves. He's been working for quite a while to bring the two movements together, and through perseverance he has done so, and we're excited about it. This is something that can bring the kind of people power needed to create real change. You know, to me, it's significant that some descendants of slave efforts have been in favor of reparations, but I think pushing instead for a change in the money system to empower all humans really rises above, the race-based separation that was clearly the cause of unjust suffering, and just promotes a new message of love for all. So I'm really excited about it myself, and to know that the leaders of this organization sort of come from the same Christian background that I do, I can really relate to what's going on. If you would like to listen to MeShorn's show, including past shows, you can find him on Blog Talk Radio using a browser on most devices by going to blogtalkradio.com/focus show. Just spell it all out, no spaces. So here is the first half of the show with Dr. Norm Kurland as the featured guest, hosted by MeShorn Daniels.
Got to fight the powers. We got to fight the powers. We got to fight the powers. We got a tremendous amount of things happening in our country in the 21st century that's going to require that we stand up and we fight the powers. We can't continue going on with the same old. We can't continue allowing the same system, the very initial system that was introduced, that intentionally left out of demographics of people based on the color of their skin. We got to fight the powers. Sometimes you got to use terminology. You got to put music together. You got to say some things to fight the powers. This is a special show. We're looking to do something very unique. We're looking to record. This is not a call-in show, but a listen show, because we're here producing a program that's going to help us fight the powers. And we believe it's time that we learn how to fight the powers by putting together new strategies, new understanding, new mentalities, and bringing people together. Welcome. This is MeShorn T. Daniels coming at you from Louisville, Kentucky. This is the Focus Show, where we say, following one course until successful. Following one course until successful. Many of my close friends of mine and people wondering why I was so adamant about saying that I'm a descendant of American slaves. And initially, when I first started this, I didn't have a whole lot of people that was on board with me. I read this book, America's Little Black Book, and it said that the parent culture that formed and created this country done some unbelievable, horrible things to a demographic of people solely because of the color of their skin. And but we wasn't Negroes, we wasn't black, and we wasn't African Americans, but we actually are descendants of American slaves. And then I come along and I meet a gentleman that tells me about a system that needs to be changed, a system that needs to be reevaluated, a system that can be considered justice for all people. And then, it comes to me that maybe this awakening was a new demographics of people getting involved called the Descendants of American Slaves. Maybe we are the answer. Maybe we could do something. Maybe we could do something great to make some changes happen in our society. I am excited about the potential of what the future is looking like, and I believe that the future is looking brighter and brighter. And I'm excited about the fact that we having new people that's coming involved, getting involved with this, and excited about what the concept of DASI is all about, and excited about the potential of us doing some unbelievable things. And before I bring on our special guest, I want to get Queen. How you doing, Queen? Welcome to the Focus Show.
Good evening, and thank you. Honored to be here once again.
Yes, Queen. I just want to thank you, Leonard and Gene. All your lines are open before I bring on our special guest and everything. Because Gene, I'm going to turn the show over to you, and you're going to actually, host this show and do what you need to do, because you got the questions and everything. Going to set it all up. So you're going to take the show over, Gene. Are you there? You ready, Gene?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Leonard, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, sir. I just wanted to tell you all that, and everybody listening, that thank you for the meeting that we had prior to this show. I think it makes it, listen, out of everybody that's on this line, I'm the oldest one. I'm the longest one been on this thing, fighting for this, thinking about this idea, Descendants of American Slaves. And it just made my heart warm up, just wept up, just to hear the passion of people feeling that we got something here and we really can do some good, and we want to do it right and make it right. I just want to thank you all, and I want you all to take a moment to just tell the listeners that's going to be listening to this broadcast after we introduce our special guest with Dr. Norman Kurland is going to articulate, is going to intelligently explain why the Descendants of American Slaves are the new change, could be the change and making America greater than it's ever been by creating a new system. Before he brings it up, I want you all, about just each one of you, take a moment and explain why you think, and Queen, starting with you first, okay, why you think the timing is right and the time is now, that change is looking more hopeful than it ever looked before.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, as far as the timing, I can say honestly, I believe that the timing is past due. What I can appreciate and what I love about DASI is that it is a proactive movement, and that it has the audacity to step out of the box from doing traditional things that historically has not worked for us, but now stepping into things that may not be traditional, but they are factual. And so I think that we have to change our culture, and changing a culture is far harder than anything that we can imagine. And I think that people have taken advantage of our culture. People know ahead of time what we're going to do in the political process. People know ahead of time what we're going to do in the financial markets. And so I think DASI is the entity that is going to turn all of that around, and that is going to change the culture of how descendants of American slaves actually operate in this country. And then we get to see a new descendant of American slaves emerge, all from the grassroots efforts of DASI.
Hey, I appreciate that. I'm going to thank you for coming on board. We really appreciate you, Queen. You have been you are the mother, you are the woman, and you are definitely the sister that we've been looking for. Again, I want to thank you for coming on board. I want to go ahead and get Leonard, the president of DASI, to bring his comments and his views of why he thinks the timing is now, and also maybe say a few things about Dr. Kurland, as you had got to talk to him, as he's going to be our special guest, and then Gene is actually going to, speak on it and introduce him into the program and the thing. But Leonard, go ahead. Tell us why you think the timing is now and what you think about Dr. Kurland.
As we've been talking here in the past couple of weeks, next year will mark truly 400 years of the presence of the descendants of Africans who were enslaved and brought to America, all right? And those descendants who actually were the forefathers of the descendants of American slaves and the American slaves. Next year will mark 400 years, all right, of our presence as slaves in America. The time is now. 400 years has passed, and we've got to go ahead and get something going. We've made very slow progress. We've made some strides, but that's not the metric that I measure our progress on. Our progress has to be measured on, how well are we doing as a community as it relates to taking care of ourselves. When we looked at Hurricane Katrina, is a good example. Hurricane Katrina happened, and all of our accoutrements or our conveniences within society were taken away, and we could not survive. You had people, left loved ones back behind because these people were on medication. So, as a dependent people, we have to be able to stand on our own, and it is time to step forward. And this is what DASI is trying to do, is get us to step forward and stand up as a people and take our place in America as we always have been. So with that said, Dr. Kurland, I've had many conversations with Dr. Kurland. Dr. Kurland is a dynamic individual. He has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experiences with a whole lot of different things as far as American life is gone. I won't go too far into it because, like I said, I'm pretty sure Gene is going to do some more introduction. But from my personal standpoint, I've had many conversations with Dr. Kurland. Dr. Kurland is an asset to our organization. And moving forward, I think that union that we can have between his organization and ours, as far as the strategy and the plan that can be implemented through DASI that can actually take effect in all of America, is a crucial and pivotal point for people in America. And when I talk about people, I'm talking about the 99% of people who are not the elite 1%. So that's just a little hint of what's going on. But, like I said, me and Dr. Kurland, when I told him, that we just recently talked, and he talked about how we want to move forward with his ideas, he told me, that's the best news I heard this year. So, like I said, that brought a smile on my face, and I'm pretty sure it brought a smile to his. So I'm going to turn it over now back to you, MeShorn, and we'll proceed with the show.
All right. And this gentleman here, Gene Gordon, I just want to say thank you for coming on board. Thank you again, Leonard, for your involvement and your leadership. And Gene Gordon, my brother, but you just don't know. This all done sparked from that day, that last time we had conversation. I called you at your home, and I spoke to you, and I think you saw what I said. Man, you need to read this information about the Center of Economic Social Justice, because after talking to you, Gene, I realized, and after listening to you speak and hearing the wealth of knowledge of who you were, I knew I had been searching, been looking, never given up on the process of the Center of Economic Social Justice, what Dr. Kurland told us, but I knew that I could not put that ahead of DASI because I felt that DASI, the identity piece, the following one course until successful, we needed to focus on making sure that we make the name be known and become serious. But most important, we need to find the right person that can articulate and communicate this information. And man, Mr. Gene Gordon, you are that individual. And I want to thank you for coming on board, and I want to thank Queen for introducing us. So for this moment on, I'm just going to be interjecting to keep Dr. Kurland on point here because he can get to going. But you get to introduce Dr. Kurland, and it's going to be in your hands, Gene, of where we go from here. Welcome to the Focus Show, Gene. Thank you, brother.
It's a great honor to be here, and I want to just take the time to thank God for putting myself and the leadership of DASI together. I want to just briefly talk about Dr. Norman Kurland and conversation with him and talking with him. The moment we began talking, I just knew that this was it. I mean, his knowledge, his wisdom, and Dr. Kurland carries a pretty healthy resume. He served during the Reagan administration back, I think, in 1985. He was a team member of the task force that came together with some ideas that was inspired by him, by Louis Kelso. And he's president of Center for Economic and Social Justice. He's also walked with Dr. King and during the civil rights movement. He played a very, very key part in that. And Norman Kurland also did a lot of work. I don't want to use the word social a lot, but he did a lot of work down in the South in Mississippi with the welfare program, and he carries a healthy resume. And he's been out there on the front line in the struggle from day one. I think he, like I said, he served he was part of the task force with the Reagan administration. And even Ronald Reagan himself took a look at these ideas and came to the conclusion that this is something that needed to be done and to save Central America, if I'm not mistaken, on some of the economic problems that they were having during that time. So I want to welcome to the Focus Show Norman Kurland. Are you there?
Yes, I am, and I must say that was one of the finest introductions that I've ever had, and I'm very excited to be with all of you. I was impressed by what Queen said, and what Leonard said, and you and MeShorn, because I think that you, that is DASI, can be the group that not only changes America, but will make America great again. It hasn't been, but it also, I can't think of any other group can address racism in the United States, but also racism throughout the world. And so I'm honored to be with all of you. And I have to say that these ideas are ideas that I learned. And I want to pass on to DASI because I think DASI has to be the leader for many reasons. Because I think American slavery treated the slaves as not full persons. They only honored 3/5 of a person. In other words, they started out with the sin of America, despite all the great things that it had the potential of doing for freedom for everyone in the world. I think slavery was, as I said, the original sin, and it has to be rectified. And again, even the language of Descendants of American Slaves is perfect as the liberators of the wage slaves of America and the world, the welfare slaves, the charity slaves, the consumer debt slaves, so that we can bring about true justice to every child, woman, and man in the world. DASI is the key group for advancing, for unifying people, and waking up America. So I'm proud to be with you.
So I want to just talk. I just want to chime in there and bring Gene. Gene got 5 questions or 5 or 6 questions, I think, anyone had. And Dr. Kurland, our time, we have an hour, and we want to get all 5 of these 5 or 6 questions in it. So I would ask that you please answer these questions in the shortest manner that you can, so we can get through all 5 of them on this time. Gene, back to you.
Yes, sir. And it's an honor and privilege to have you here with us today. But I want to, get straight to the point. I was always taught the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So I'm going to get right to it because we're limited for time. But I want you to explain to the listening audience, to understand, the money. When you speak about money, we think about the fiat currency, what I call and what it is, fiat currency that we carry around in our pockets. But I want you to explain to the listening audience and understand the money and credit creation process, and to get a more clear understanding of what money is.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to say that what I'm going to use as a definition is that of the person who taught me about expanded capital ownership, or what I call not a third way, but a just third way. And money is a social good. It's something that civilization advanced. It's a way of measuring. Barter, for example, before you had currency, people exchanged things, and they had to have a way of measuring the value of the things, because otherwise it wouldn't be a fair or just exchange. Let me just read from Kelso's definition, Louis Kelso. As I said, he's my most important mentor, but there are 3 others that are very critical. But Kelso said money is not a part of the visible sector of the economy. People do not consume money. It's not a physical factor of production, but it is a yardstick for measuring economic input, economic outtake, and the relative value of the things that are going to be exchanged, whether they're goods or services. It provides a way of measuring. It's supposed to. But today's money is not backed by real things. It's not backed by assets. There should always be backing. But in today's money, it's created through the Federal Reserve System, but behind it are not assets of any kind, but rather government debt. So the more that the country goes into deficits, the more backing there is for the money. And the interesting thing is America once had a gold standard, and then Nixon abandoned the gold standard, and now and all the countries of the world are following the U.S. in terms of money. Now, the reason that money is important is because if a few control it, it will mean that power over money is controlled by a few. So therefore, it will become corrupt. power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so the money system today is one that will only benefit a tiny fraction. 1%, for example, of the American people own more than the bottom 90% combined. In other words, the bottom 90% work for them as their wage slaves or salary slaves. And then those who can't work. But what Kelso pointed out, and this is very basic for them, every child, every woman, every man in America, as well as throughout the world, should have an equal opportunity to become an owner. Why? Because you're either going to own or you're going to be owned. And, of course, slavery in America, someone else owned your body, someone else got the fruits of whatever you produced. We have to move away from treating people as things and recognize that if the right money system, a just money system, will enable people to own the robots, the artificial intelligence, and all the things that are displacing many forms of labor. So in any event, we have to see a new world in which people are able to work and love whatever work they're in, but become the owners and begin to receive the profits. And this all can be done without depending on the savings of the past, without depending on the wealth of the rich. We don't have to take away their property. No, property gives you rights. It gives you power. It gives you the right to the fruits of what you own. It gives you control. You don't want to control other people, but you want to control things. And so money and credit, the right kind of credit, and we're not using that yet, although Kelso invented a way to get workers in the private sector. We were able to get the laws through the Congress so that ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, have enabled over 10 million American workers to become owners. Many have bought out their companies from the original owner. This can be done now for every person, not just the private sector workers. It's got to be done for everybody. It's got to be done for the government workers. It's got to be done for the people who can't work, who are the disabled. So in any event, the answer is money is the key, and I think the Kelso's definition is correct.
Yes, sir. Thanks for that response. Well done, Dr. Kurland. My second question is, in today's news, we hear so much about political reform, which people have become more dependent upon the political system and the government. It's a problem that's happening not only in America, but throughout the world. As you said earlier, that other countries have adopted America's way, and it's proven. We see it every day, in international news, that it's not working. Would you explain to us why you feel that the solution to the problems that we as Americans and other countries throughout the world is facing today? Why do you feel that the political reform or, cleaning up the political system is not the answer?
You're right. You're right, because it is right in politics that the way you get share power is supposed to be through the vote. But the problem is, if the voter doesn't have power, economic power, then they become dependent on the rich or on the politician. You want the politicians and the rich to get out of the way, and they can't stop this. And the reason that I say that is because just as the civil rights movement was able to mobilize the people power, enough people power, so that segregation, which no one believed could be changed back in the early the 40s, the 50s, and early 60s, until people organized in a peaceful way. If in fact you were able, I think roughly 500,000 people came in for the March on Washington in '63, but because of the work of people like Medgar Evers and SNCC and people in NAACP and other organizations, in a peaceful way, they were able to get 500,000 people into Washington. Dr. King made it very clear: you don't use violence. SNCC did not use. It was Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Now, many of them didn't have the economic solution, but Dr. King understood that you needed, and he gave speeches on this, that you needed what he called a new synthesis beyond capitalism and beyond socialism and other forms of collectivism. You got to get power to the people, economic power. Then the political system will work. And that's and I think that's what DASI can do. I think they should be aiming at getting 1 million people, twice that of the 60s, but not just DASI people, but bringing in people from throughout the country to come in and demonstrate at the Federal Reserve, because that institution, which is not a government institution, it was brought into being by the law, is the source of the problem, the economic problems of America and the world. It's the most powerful central bank in the world. Now the people have to not only demonstrate, but each of the 12 regions of the Federal Reserve, you have 12 regions, and I know, Gene, that you're in St. Louis. We've talked to we gave a talk in St. Louis back in the 2008, and it is open. We have to get the people to own the regional Fed, or at least control who is doing it, because right now it's the Wall Street people who are controlling the Federal Reserve. The New York Fed is the one that's pretty much controlling policy. But
that was part of my last question. So we're going to leave it at that right there, and we'll come back to that later on. That was my last question. But you talked about my third question to you. You talked about ownership and why ownership be at the center, at the forefront, and in particularly DASI being a catalyst to taking, and educating the people on ownership and leading the way in becoming, that example for not just, as you just stated, not just for DASI and the Descendants of American Slaves, but for people throughout the country and the world, and we're committed to doing that. But I wanted my fourth question. So you touched bases on the ownership part of it, so I can skip that. My fourth question to you is the Homestead Act. And the Homestead Act, if some of you listeners never knew about or understand, Lincoln passed the Homestead Act, where 160 acres were given away for those to move out of it. Given away free, and to move west and the Midwest, and they were given away free. And that was the Homestead Act. And Dr. Kurland has come up with something under the leadership of Kelso, the Capital Homestead Act. How can that be relevant and beneficial to not just DASI, but to the other countries? And can we implement this not just on a local scale, but on a national and global level, and under a comprehensive, long-range national Capital Homestead Act strategy? Why is such reform such reform necessary from the standpoint of economic growth and expanding capital ownership.
Okay. Now, I left out the fact that that it's conventional thinking that says that the only way you can own is to save. Well, most people live from hand to mouth. But what Kelso said is that's not true, that's the only way you can become an owner is through past savings. You're not dependent on the rich, the wealth of the rich. No. He talks about credit, which is what banks do. They look over your plan, and if it's what's called a feasible project, they will make a loan because that's what they're in the business of doing, is making loans, but it's backed by by new assets and future savings, not past savings, so that if in fact you can get to the full pre-tax stream of profits, in a few years you could pay off those loans, but every year you would add, say, $7,000 for every man, woman, and child. This is slow growth. It couldn't be a lot faster, but I'm giving you slow growth, around 7,000. So a child born today would be able to get $7,000. Of course, their family would determine what they buy of newly issued shares that would pay for in which they'd be full voting, full dividend bearing. And there'd be no tax to the corporations that pay out their profits in this way. If they pay out dividends and all their profits go out, and you tax at the individual level after you pay for the shares, and the rich pay for it right now because they would have more taxable income, and we'll talk about the tax side of it. But the important thing is that you would be able to, through local banks, a child born today, just to give you some numbers in our projections, where with the changes that by the time the child reached age 65, they'd have a little less after tax. They'd have a little less than $500,000 accumulated. Starts slow, but it builds up over time. Just at $7,000, they'd have close to less than $50,000, but which is more than Social Security can provide. They would that child from the time they were born, and nothing begins to build up. They'd have $1.6 billion after taxes during those years before reaching 65. This is slow growth, but this is what we give you as and these numbers are all you can get from our website at www.cesj.org. You can get all that in that library, and that library is now available. I want DASI to be the principal group that studies that and then encourages all members of DASI to become aware of the way in which you can empower people through ownership without taking anything from the rich, because they can't take it with them. So we also changed the inheritance laws so that you tax the recipient, and if they get over, say, $1 million, then you tax them over what they get for over $1 million. So they're encouraged to spread out their existing ownership over time, because again, they haven't figured out, the Creator hasn't given them a way in which they can take their property with them.
Yeah. Well put. And I do encourage the listening audience to go onto their website, cesj.org, and there's so much information on that website, and that you can learn from it, and systems and things that you can apply to your own life to make life better for you. And Dr. Kurland mentioned about, how, you can save on taxes and the accumulation of wealth from, for a baby born today. And that will kind of like combat this dilemma we're having with the Social Security. what's going on with Social Security. I mean, the system is going broke, and Social Security is based on what you what you're putting in now. But
it's a pay-as-you-go system, you see, Social Security, and there are no assets behind it. So the further we go ahead in debt, the deficits keep building up until we go like Greece. We become a bankrupt country. So we have to turn around. And the only way you can do that is to enable, this is a basic law of economics. Both Marx, he rejected this, and then the primary Keynes rejected it. It's called Say's Law of Markets. And basically it says production has to equal consumption incomes. And consumption, if you don't have that, there's no reason to produce. But today, most of that consumption incomes go to the rich, and they can't spend it. There's no way physically they can spend it. Therefore, we have to democratize ownership opportunities.
Yeah, and that word is quite common within the Descendants of American Slaves and African American community, consumption. We have become the biggest consumers in the world, with America being a $120 trillion business, yet we get 1.2 trillion of it, and we consume all of it.
Thanks again for joining us on the Just Third Way podcast. That was the first half of an episode of The Focus Show hosted by MeShorn Daniels, and his show is available at blogtalkradio.com/focus show, and you can contact MeShorn on Facebook at facebook.com/MeShorn, that's MESHORN, Daniels, especially if you want to join DASI, that's Descendants of American Slaves, Inc., and of course you can join CESJ by going to cesj.org, select Participate, then select Become a Member. So have a good week, and own or be owned.